Hello and welcome back. This is Antique Dust. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Rob.
And together we are relaunching Antique Dust.
Way.
Woo! We have had a little bit of a foray away from the airwaves, but we thought we'd come back and start with a few, as it's Pride Month, come up with a few classic Pride movies.
Or gay movies rather than Pride movies, I think we would say.
Well, yeah. So the one we're looking at now is everyone can actually view it. That's in the UK, or if you have sort of
a VPN.
A VPN, which we're not sponsored as yet, you can have a look at it on Channel 4. It was a Channel 4 film, which is a TV movie, which is called Closing Numbers. Now, this film has Tim Woodward, which is Edward Woodward's son, very renowned, good renowned actor, and Jane Asher, you know, the lady from the Cakes and Crossroads.
Yay.
Woohoo! Now, this story was launched and first aired on National AIDS Day.
World AIDS Day.
World AIDS Day.
1993.
1993. And it's very hard-hitting because it's about a husband and wife, and the wife discovers that the husband's been having a fling with another gentleman. So the story starts very nice suburban street, looks very glorious and middle class and Arga country. Well, actually, Jane Asher does actually have an Arga.
Yeah, well, of course
on
she does.
On this film, anyway. I'm sure she does in real life.
I'm sure she does.
I have Arga envy at everyone that has an Arga.
But
Rayburns
it sort of,
don't
yeah.
do the same thing.
But it sort of presents it, first of all, as being kind of, you know, the ideal suburban kind of setting, detached house, big garden,
sash windows,
leafy street,
modern cars, driveway. It's got the whole package. So Jane Asher plays a character called Anna, and Tim Woodward plays a chap called Keith. They have a teenage son called Peter that's just about to go off to university and is in his final stages of doing his entrance exams to get to Oxford. So it all starts with sort of like a little bit of afternoon delight.
I know. How rude.
Very saucy. So we have a look at Jane Asher's boobies.
Just a fleeting glimpse.
And a little bit of groinage from Tim Woodward. Unfortunately, he has sadly passed away.
Yes.
He passed away about a year or so ago, and that was in 2022 or 2023 for cancer. Very sad. And she comments on sort of how passionate he's been and how very inventive he's being.
For the last 3 months.
Everyone likes a little bit of feedback, don't we? So the conversation goes along, and she said, well, some people say that if you sort of show so much attention in the afternoon that maybe you've lost your job.
And you're going to the library for the rest of the day.
Yeah, and he said, oh, no, I'm sort of very busy, very, very, very important. I think he's an accountant or something.
Oh, yes, he is.
Something like that. And they made a passing comment about some books being donated to a charity or something. So the next scene we see is him driving off, and the son's making a comment saying you've got soap in your ear, saying like, aye, Dad, you've been having it away with Mummy. And then Jane Asher going through a book. And in the book, there's a little card and of a garden centre. It's like a business card. Business card. And in the back, it's got say like, "Give me a call sometime, kiss." So her heckles go up because she thinks, well, he's been very, very inventive in bed and things like that. So something's stimulating him in the downstairs department. And I mean, she's not complaining, but obviously she'd prefer a faithful relationship.
Now, here's the question: does she make quite a big leap in finding that to immediately thinking he's having an affair?
I think yes, but also when someone's behaviour's changed so drastically for no apparent reason. I mean, fair enough if someone's got a revitalised. I mean, like you've taken early retirement recently, and I've taken semi-retirement recently, so we're full of energy. That's why we're back at the podcast.
Yay!
Whee!
Well, not so much energy, but time. We've got time.
We've got more time.
We've got more time.
And I'm not commuting in an hour and a half a day. She does make a bit of a leap, but I think she realises something's different, but she can't really put a finger on it. Well, I think she put a finger on lots of things.
I do think she managed to put her finger on something.
Yes. But basically she puts 2 and 2 together, creates 5, and then we have a few scenes of her of a phone ringing in a garden centre, and a receptionist who's sort of a young receptionist saying, "Talk to me." So she's dropping.
So she's calling and then not saying anything, and then she plucks up the courage finally to talk to said receptionist. Clearly, she's assuming
it's her
that is the affair partner, and she's just very flummoxed, basically. But agree a day and a time and a place to meet for
lunch to discuss things
heart to heart talk.
So
and this poor receptionist has no foggiest idea what's going on.
And she's talking to a colleague saying, "Oh, she's balmy, she's absolutely bonkers, but I'm kind of tempted to go." The next scene we see is Jane Asher in this busy sort of nice sort of country pub restaurant-y place with a thimble full of wine, which looks very disappointing. People do have big glasses of wine.
It was a normal glass of wine. It was a normal glass of wine by most people's standards.
But it was the size of glass you used to get given to you at Christmas time from your grandmother. You know, like it's like tiny thimble full of wine on a stalk.
I never got wine from my grandmother.
Did you not?
Well, she was dead, so...
Oh, right. That would have been very difficult.
Yes.
So I say my grandma introduced me to snowballs and baby sham. So she always cracked open a baby sham.
Well,
the baby bottles of baby sham.
Well, she has a lot to answer for, doesn't she?
I know, yes. It's my entry-level drug into the lovely delights of booze. So anyway, Jane Asher's there, or Anna, the character, is at this restaurant, and then this gorgeous lady comes in, sort of nice camel coat, looking very Sloane Ranger.
Looking very early 90s.
Very early 90s, just on the sort of the cusp of Sloane Rangerisms. I actually saw that book, the Sloane Ranger Handbook.
I know the book.
Yeah, our friend Kimberly is in page 3, literally. No, on genuinely she is. So I don't know how she ended up in that book, but
probably through being a Sloane Ranger. Just a wild star.
She's now our neighbour in Leafy Cheshire, so she's left her Sloaning days behind. She spends most of her summer in Abersock now. So this woman comes in looking very attractive, and the character Anna is like looking a little bit.
This is a competition.
And she, in fairness, the lady does look. Jane Asher does look amazing, very gorgeous for her hair, but this lady looks just that tad a little bit younger, tad a little bit more elegant, even though that's really hard with Jane Asher. Because Jane Asher in the 90s was in her peak. Anyway, this lady comes up to the table and is like, dun, dun, dun. And she says, "Oh, can I borrow the chair? Can I have the chair?" And then sort of Steve. No, is it Steve? Yes, it is Steve.
It is Steve.
The Steve character comes in and said, "Oh, no, that's me. I'm so sorry I'm late." It's all flustered and everything.
Yeah. And of course, Anna is rather confused as to who this random...
So, are you a boyfriend? Are you a brother, a cousin? Da, 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 da. And I said, "No, I'm the person you need to speak to."
Dun, dun,
dun, dun. And her face drops. Not much dialogue actually happens here, but he does use the word. Some people like bisexual.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah, and her face just crumples. It's just a gorgeous piece of acting.
Yeah, and they do have a conversation about safe sex and.
Yeah, so we go from the restaurant to a park bench, and then they're basically having a very polite discussion. I'm just saying, well, I met him in a bar, and he looked very nervous and what have you, and sort of just an ideal candidate to get mugged or robbed and what have you. And we started our fling 3 months ago. But he says, we have done everything safely, and just letting you know that sort of there's nothing safe here. And then it goes on to saying that he did admit that 3 years ago he went through a very promiscuous period.
Yeah, and that's really, from what my analysis of it, that's really the reason why Steve decided to meet, because he's aware of the promiscuous period that Keith went through 3 years before, lots of unsafe sex, but doesn't know or didn't think that Keith and Anna were still having sex, but now he's begun to think that, well, they are still having sex. Does she know about his promiscuous period? Well, clearly she doesn't. And is she safe?
Yeah, and they build up a friendship of sorts where And she said, where she admits that he's been very inventive in bed for the last 3 months. That's obviously through sort of the interactions with Steve. And then it leads on where she's overwhelmed, doesn't know what to do, where to go, that sort of thing. And Steve helps her, but also takes her. He's a carer for someone in the final stages of AIDS who's dying of AIDS. This is a character called Jim. Now, what's really tender about this drama is it's two stories that are interwoven, where you've got Jim, who is dying of AIDS, and his relationship with his parents, who are quite elderly. His mum's trying to do her best, but his father is being very stubborn and refusing to interact, but is going to his flat or going to outside the flat, letting the mum go in and staying outside.
Yeah, he doesn't want to interact with his son.
No, and doesn't. And is being a bit stubborn with the mother. But Jim is a very creative sort, and it's this like disappointing council flat. But inside it's very exuberant with cherubs and ornate things. So it comes across that he's had a very creative life, and there's photographs around where he's gone through sporty phases. He's like been stunning and gorgeous and pretty and everything. And now there's this husk of a man in bed. We first meet Jim where we see a scene with Steve and Jim, and it's Jim's birthday, and Steve's running him a bath. And he's in bed and he's being a little bit sort of camp and hurrah. And Steve runs a bath and he's telling the story about this dream about being in the spotlights and sort of the warmth flickering from the lights and the audience being there. And then it turns out that it's got an element of onset of dementia of sorts, because when he goes into the bathtub and he's finishing the sort of the punchline of the story, Steve finishes it for him, and then Jim
gets frustrated,
and I think it doesn't look like that happens very often, and then Jim says, "Oh, when did I tell you?" I said, "When you were opening your presents this morning." So it's obviously sort of
the lesions on his brain.
There's lesions on his brain. There's lesions all over his body, and that was a really, really nice tender scene. Then Steve we have another scene with Anna and Steve when Anna's going to get tested and is seeing a counsellor before the blood test and what have you, because that's when you had the blood test done. Then you had to wait a couple of weeks for the results to come through. So the story arc happens over the 2 to 3 weeks. So which makes it does do compelling drama, and it feels like Jane. The Anna character, it has compartmentalized her life into what's expected of her.
Well, she has the life of a quintessential middle class, middle England, middle-aged
and
woman.
She's just doing what's expected of her, which is quite sad, but she's just fulfilling the brief. And we have a scene with her and her father. Her mum's obviously has passed, because they're talking about putting flowers on the grave, and the dad's saying, "Have you got a lump? Is there a problem? Is there an affair?" Or so he's trying to get to grips with it, because obviously Anna, it becomes apparent sort of Anna sort of meets up with him birthdays, Christmases, and a couple of other times a year. So I think she's connecting with people, because when she meets Jim for the first time, he has sort of like tremors because his medication's taken in, and she sort of from being sitting at the side of the bed is like holding him in her arms, and she's now, I think, because of what's happened to her with her husband, is that she's now finding a purpose, which is quite lovely in the way through all this trauma.
I mean, some good, I suppose, does come out of the trauma.
And the relationship, she sort of in the spare bedroom, she asks the husband, sort of, Keith, why? And he said, well, just for comfort. And it says, what more comfort do you need? And there's a scene where she goes to a sex shop and gets some big dildo,
Yeah.
and then
That's not a scene I'm going to forget in a hurry.
No.
Jane Asher
because
brandishing a
massive dildo, a strap on, and said, "Do I need to wear this?" And because she's saying, "What have I done wrong? What have I done wrong to not satisfy you?" And he says, "It's just comfort." And then we have so the story. It is the primary story is about the chap dying of AIDS, and I think it's been bolted on with regards to how AIDS is affecting everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take into consideration that this was made in the early 90s, and this was when the AIDS crisis was pretty much at its peak. We were a long way away from PrEP and all the rest of it. So. And AIDS in the early 90s was essentially a death.
Yeah,
a death sentence.
You got diagnosed, and then they normally said get your affairs in order.
Yeah.
It might not last a year.
Yeah. But what this film is doing is attempting to humanize AIDS, because I think pretty much prior to this it had all been about the education, about the tombstones and the leaflets and so on. But this was very much about the human face.
Yeah, and affecting everyone, not just gay men, because it's obviously so the how they've done it as an entry thing is the husband had a fling with a man, and could have infected his wife.
Yeah, but in addition to that, I totally get that. I mean, it's about trying to demonstrate how anyone can be affected, but also in the representation of Steve and Jim, very, very different to the way in which gay men, AIDS was represented up until that point. Prior to that, it was very much the Sun, the tabloid version of it. But when I talk about how this humanizes AIDS, it's not just because Jane Asher could have AIDS. It's about the character who does have AIDS is presented as a human being and not a monster.
And it's showing that the fathers rejected them. So because so many gay men were rejected by their families and died a very lonely death because the families just rejected it. And that was also covered in the Russell T Davies It's a Sin, which was set in the late 80s.
And we may be coming on to that at some point.
Yeah, we will be covering It's a Sin. That's another one that's on our list of podcasts to do.
Yeah.
But
I think the word I would use is nuanced.
Nuanced.
It's a nuanced representation of gay life and bisexuality as well. Don't forget that we're dealing with the bisexuality of the husband, and again that was something that wouldn't get very much representation back then.
No, because it happened to other people. Didn't happen to the everyday people, and it's so sensitively done, and it shows, I say, the relationship of Jim with Anna and Steve, and also with his mother. And the mother is trying her best because she doesn't want to ask any questions. Because she doesn't know if she wants to hear the answers, and that's quite sad. She's just being there, and she ends up going back to stay with him under the protestations of her husband, who's a little bit standoffish. But we can tell there's certain scenes with the father, who played Hetty Wainthrop's husband in Hetty Wainthropp Investigates. He's a very well-known actor. Can't remember his name just at the moment, but he obviously is grieving his son, and there's a really tender scene towards the end of the film where it becomes apparent that he didn't hate his son. He was jealous of his son because he garnered the attention and he felt left out. which was quite
And he also,
sad.
the other thing we learned towards the end of the film is that they believed he was a prostitute, which wasn't
Wasn't the
the case at all.
Where he was actually studying and he was going to the library, and he was an artist, or it did something, I think something set design or something in
the theatre.
Something in the theatre, darling. But the story sort of goes along with Anna creating her own life, where she gets tested. She's while she's waiting for the results, Peter, her son, is asking what's going on, because obviously she's moved into the spare room and there's something going on. He can pick up the tension, and she tells him, and he doesn't believe her. And in the same process, the husband doesn't want to know what the results are for her results, and knows that it's going to happen.
So he scarpers.
And then we have part of his backstory. When he went to boarding school, he had a relation with another school friend, and that's where everything started. That's where he felt comfort from male interaction. And there's a lot of sadness in this film.
Yeah, but not tragic sadness, because that's what we're sort of used to.
It was a bury your gaze
in the bury your gaze trope, and this isn't.
Well, we do bury
that.
One of them.
Well,
because Jim passes.
but that's not a bury your gaze moment.
No,
not really. Not in the context of the film. It's an inevitable outcome of the story, but it's not the sort of melodramatic tragedy that we so often saw, and I'd be honest, still sometimes do see. Not as much, thankfully, but there is still a little bit of an element of that because there was a long period certainly in the 80s and the 90s that if there was a gay character in a film, well, you'd be lucky if there was one.
But it was either be comic relief or a tragic end.
Or dead. I mean, that's the essence of bury your gaze.
Yeah, and that's what's really quite sad. But with this film, it's that there's sort of a nice story arc where Anna admits that she didn't actually love Keith to begin with, but she only found love with him, and she didn't even like sex until, say, with Keith. But when she had her son, and then they couldn't have any more children, she saw how wonderful Keith was with Peter, and that's where her love for her husband came in, and with that came in the like of having sex with him. So she was being honest, because she was just falling into the trap of doing what was expected, but out of doing what was expected, she fell in love, and he married because it was what was expected of him. But there was always that anxiety. There was something in the background that
she didn't know about.
She didn't know, and he sought solace elsewhere, which was very sensitively done. And there was a really nice scene towards the end at the funeral, Jim's funeral, where you've got Jane, you've got Anna and Steve talking to each other, and then you've also got Keith there. So they're becoming one as like a family in that moment.
Yes, and that sort of family of choice.
Yeah, but there's also the unknown, because Jane Asher, so Anna's her character Anna, she gets the all clear for HIV, and then the husband goes for his test. But while he was going through his flux period, when not knowing what was happening, he had an encounter on a train and that happened really quite suddenly.
Yeah, well, he was rogered by a soldier in the toilet, in the train toilet.
Yeah, the intercity.
That's one way to
that
put
was
it.
Quite a graphic scene as well, wasn't it?
Well, it didn't spare your blushes.
No, it was just like, yeah. So there is the unknown, and the whole thing ends with Anna sort of wanting to volunteer for these HIV/AIDS charity.
Mm-hmm.
And they're seeing this video which is sort of introducing people to go and work within that, where they're saying, it starts with lesions and someone's going around with a crayon and putting marks on everyone's faces, and when asking to look in the mirror, saying, look, it can happen to anyone. And so that fades out, and the husband's in there. Oh, it's Steve and Anna that are in this this like charity room where they're being educated, watching a slideshow, and then it sort of fades to one final scene where it's got the husband. He's come out of he's gone for his test, but they're in their domestic setting in the house, and he's looking at a slight pimple.
He finds a mark.
He finds a pimple on his face,
and then fade to black.
So we don't know. It could just be a zit.
Could have been.
But I think it was very, very well done. It's still very hard hitting now, and I really can't understand why it hasn't been redone or rebroadcast. I mean, it is on Channel 4, and I think it has been on Channel 4, sort of the download thing, for quite a number of years.
Yeah, I suppose the reality is that for all we know, given that we surprisingly, given that we do a TV related podcast, we don't actually watch very much in the terms of broadcast TV. So for all I know, it could be being shown every other week.
I don't think it is, but overall, I think it was an incredibly well done drama, probably and very hard hitting for its time. Because I remember when it first came out, I stumbled across it, and I think I pressed record, and I did have it on VHS for donkeys, because I think it was a very emotional, it was an emotive sort of a thing, and it had a lot of actors in there. Now there was a scene in there where we got two Grange Hill actresses that are from the classic Grange Hill, and so they appear in it.
Yeah, a few familiar faces,
but there's not like a massive cast. But all the cast that are in there, apart from the son, I don't think Peter, the chap that played Peter's been in a huge amount.
Oh well, I think you need to do a bit more research on that one. But the most recent thing he was in was Waterloo Road.
Oh, I thought that was Steve that was in that, not Peter.
No.
Oh right, it was so it was Peter that was in that. Oh, now I recognise him because he was
the penny dropped. The penny dropped.
I thought it was Steve that was was the one, because the son and the son and the boyfriend. So Peter and Steve did look. They've got a similar look.
if you
read into that as much as you will.
If you say so.
So anyway, dear listeners, I'd like to encourage everyone that listens to this to go on the Channel 4.
On the Channel 4.
On the Channel 4.
On the Channel 4.
On all 4.
Once you've been to the Asda, go on to the Channel 4.
Go and check out closing numbers on all 4. It's only 93 minutes, but it is really lovely. It's very hard hitting, but it's really well done, and you feel for all of the characters. It's all the primary characters. So,
well, obviously we don't feel much about the nasty ones.
There isn't that many nasty ones, but there is it's well worth a watch. And for 93 minutes. So
what else would you be doing for 93 minutes? Well, if you're Jane Asher and Tim
well,
Woodward.
Actually, you could start baking a cake watching Jane Asher with the boobs out.
That just sounds too much like hard work for me. There's too much admin involved in that for me.
So anyway, dear listeners, please let us know what you think. We are on all social media networks at Antique Dust, and we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, my name's Jonathan, signing off.
And my name's Rob, and I'm saying goodbye.
Bye-bye.